Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and I am currently on a huge road to Doomsday rewatch. Rewatching Marvel content just to prepare myself for the inevitable Doomsday at the end of the year. And as I'm watching through these things, I figured we might as well go ahead and make some rankings to at least keep up a little bit with you guys. If you have been aware of my Marvel Cinematic Multiverse or MCM rankings up to this point, we've already talked about Phase 5, the Defender Saga, and recently the Fox X-Men on my channel, so I figured today we might as well head back to the original origin point of the MCM, that being the MCU. And today I'm going to be doing a ranking of the Phase 1 projects. Now, Phase 1 isn't a particularly long phase, so this is going to definitely be a shorter video, but I figured it's better just to section off these kind of rankings and do each phase individually, even if some of them aren't super long, because it allows me to also talk more about some of these films because I'll have more time. So without further ado, we're going to be talking about Phase 1 in this video. Everything in the MCU from Iron Man up to the Avengers. Now, specifically because of the way that the MCU likes to section out its content, I'm only going to be talking about the 6 movies in this video, because technically, if you look it up, the one-shots and the other Marvel television shows that started airing around this time aren't counted as Phase 1 if you look at like many lists, so I won't be including them here in this video, so I just thought I'd mention that right off the bat. But if this video does well, maybe we can do a Marvel one-shot ranking or a Marvel television ranking later. But anyway, in this video, we're going to be ranking the 6 Phase 1 MCU movies from my least favorite to my favorite. So without further ado, let's get into the video. I mean, what did you guys really expect? The Incredible Hulk is always kind of been looked at as the black sheep of Phase 1 and the whole MCU, and it's really easy to see why, as The Incredible Hulk released in the exact same year as Iron Man, and these two films could not be more different from one another, as Iron Man decided to take the lens of, we're going to adapt the comic books, but we're also going to make fun of them while still taking ourselves seriously. This movie kind of went for the route of, we're going to take it all seriously, and there's going to be very few jokes, and it's going to be more of a gritty, grounded superhero story. And you can definitely kind of see why this film is the black sheep then, because Iron Man was more successful, so they chose that formula for the rest of the MCU instead of this formula, which means that this film feels very tonally distinct from the rest of the MCU, which I can at least appreciate. This film is also definitely very weird because this was back in the time where the premise was basically they were going to be kind of half continuing the previous Hulk iteration, but also center it in the MCU, which is why they do the thing of we don't see the origin story, and a lot of it is just feels very interesting. I do like most of it. I will say the action is pretty cool when we do eventually get to it. I do like the Hulk CGI here. This is one of the few times in the MCU where we actually got Rage Hulk, which was really cool. And I really love Liv Tyler as Betty Ross. She is a very fun little love interest, and she makes for a good character. Even, of course, I love William Hurt as General Ross. I kind of wish he had more to do because he's kind of a one-dimensional villain in this movie, but it's fine for what it is. But that's where kind of a lot of my praise ends. One thing I will say that does always drag this movie down for me, in my opinion, is the fact that I'm not huge on Edward Norton as the Hulk. I don't know if it's I think it's a main mix of the fact that this is the only movie Edward Norton ever got to be Bruce Banner / the Hulk, which means that I've become more accumulative and more appreciative of Mark Ruffalo's portrayal of the character, and I actually like that portrayal a lot better, as they really go hard to show the quirky kind of side of Bruce Banner in the Hulk, where this movie is a way more serious and grounded version of the character. So I've just never been huge on Edward Norton. Also, I'm not huge on Emil Blonsky. He's just a really weak villain, as they basically just bring him in as one of the soldiers hunting down the Hulk, and he gets beat by the Hulk 2 times, and then General Ross gives him the serum, he becomes Abomination, they have a big fight sequence, and that's the most of what you get out of that character, which is really annoying. At the end of the day, I guess I will say that I don't hate The Incredible Hulk like a lot of other people. I still think it's a decent enough movie, but it's definitely the weakest film in phase one, in my opinion. And overall, it's definitely maybe one of my lesser MCU films, but I definitely think that it has its own merits. Means it's not the worst in the overall MCU, but it's definitely the weakest film here in phase one. Next up, we have Iron Man 2. And this film is notorious for being a movie that even Jon Favreau was very unhappy with because they basically pumped this movie out to ride the MCU high, and they only really gave them a year to rake this movie when Jon Favreau has claimed he needed 2 or even 3 years to get the script right. And you can definitely feel that a little bit in the final product, as this movie is a case of being a conjumbled mess of subplots that don't really connect to one another until we get to the very end. First subplot that I'll mention that's kind of the most major plot is that Tony Stark is slowly starting to die because of his arc reactors. Arc reactor is starting to kill him instead of heal him, and it kind of leads to the demon in a bottle storyline from the comics where he believes he's going to die, so he starts acting reckless, which leads to a lot of the other subplots, until in the end Tony Stark is able to get some notes from his father and this old model, which he eventually is able to use to literally create a new element, which he uses to save his life, which is like the main hook of the entire film, which is probably the most interesting subplot, if I'm being honest. Then the second subplot is that due to Tony being reckless, the government wants to take his suits. So they end up hiring Rhodey, who tries to fight back, but eventually he just steals the Mark II and gives it to all of them and then suddenly the villain makes it into a War Machine armor and kind of turns against them, which is like, oh, I can't believe that's what we're going with, but okay. It's definitely one of the most boring side plots. We then have the side plot of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the original movie, where we get introduced to Natasha Romanoff, who is a really good character. I do like Black Widow, and she's definitely very interesting in this movie as kind of a great setup. We get to see some more Nick Fury, which I'm always down for. But then we also have probably the worst, in my opinion. We have the villain. Ivan Vanko, aka Whiplash, is one of my least favorite MCU villains because his relationship with the hero is very, very minimal. As basically Tony never realizes he's trying to stop Vanko until Vanko is literally punching him in the face, because he has no idea this character exists because he's only mad at Tony's father because of his father having a relationship with Tony. Then he builds his own arc reactor and shows up to this race in Monaco where Tony gets the cool suit, briefcase armor, which is really cool. But then they have this fight, and then after that fight, Vanko fakes his death and then sits in Justin Hammer's lab for the rest of the movie until the very ending where he shows up to fight the heroes. It's like Tony never realizes this is the villain he's trying to stop until he's literally punching him in the face because he's off doing his own thing with his own subplot. Iron Man 2 is one of those movies that frustrates me because it's definitely got good elements. Like, I love so much about this movie. Mainly, it's like we got great armor suit ups. Black Widow is great. I love War Machine. I love Tony. I love everything. It's just the fact that it's so conjumbled, and you really can feel the fact that they definitely needed some more time to figure out the kinks of this movie because it could have been so much better. But unfortunately, we didn't get that movie. Man. Next up, I have Captain America, the First Avenger. Now, I know a lot of people love this movie. I'm unfortunately not one of them. My main problem is, I've gone on the record to say this before on the channel, I'm not super big on war movies. I just find them really boring, and I just don't like them that much. There are a couple exceptions, of course. I'm not totally devoid of liking them, but this is definitely one of those cases where I'm not huge on most of it because of the World War II setting. I just don't get invested in that side of the story. I'm here to see Captain America, Red Skull, and Peggy Carter. I'm not really here to see the World War II aspect of the film, which is really annoying. I do like, however, that this film is definitely different by setting itself in the 1940s. Definitely gives it a new feel to it that we don't get in the rest of phase one. and we get to see some great moments. I love the whole backstory they give for Steve Rogers, as he's the scrawny kid who eventually goes through the project to become Captain America, which is a really cool sentiment. There's some good fight sequences. Red Skull is a very interesting antagonist. It's just unfortunate we never got to do more with him because of A, when this movie is set, and B, the end of this movie features him touching the Tesseract and then disappearing to Vormir, and we don't see him again until Infinity War, and that's the only other time we've seen him, which is unfortunate because I really wish we could have seen more of him. I like Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter. I think she's a fine love interest character who's nice. I like, of course, Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, who is a great best friend in this movie, but I will admit I liked him a lot better once he became the Winter Soldier, so that's a little bit unfortunate on this movie. And there is other good moments. I mentioned the end. I mentioned the fight sequences, but I also love that ending where Steve Rogers wakes up in the modern day. And overall, it's a very good movie, I'll say, that has its moments. It just, unfortunately, that wartime aspect of it really drags it down for me on every rewatch. And I kind of wish we got to do more with Red Skull, but other than that, it's a fine movie. It's just not the Phase 1 movie I'm always flocking to, and it's, in my opinion, the weakest of the three Captain America films. Thor has always been one of those MCU movies that's frustrated me beyond belief because it feels like the sequel instead of the original movie. That's just always been a personal take. Basically, the whole premise of this thing is that we introduce ourselves to the cosmic mythical side of the MCU through Asgard. We get to meet Thor, Loki, we get to meet their cultures, and I'm really loving the first 30 minutes where we're actually on Asgard. And then Odin, after Thor decides to attack the Frost Giants, Odin decides Thor is no longer worthy and banishes him to the deserts of New Mexico. And it always frustrates me because after that moment, it just becomes a fish out of water comedy. And I wanted to see Asgard. Asgard is such a good location, and I always feel like we never get to spend enough time there. And it's always so frustrating to me because, you created this epic world of Asgard just to strand us in the deserts of New Mexico, which I could take a 30-minute drive and go see. It's like, why would you do that? It's a nice story, at least, allows us to get introduced to some fun side characters in the form of Eric Selvig, Darcy Lewis, and of course Jane Foster, who are great. We get to see a nice little story for Thor as he learns to become more worthy again, and we get to see him have a pretty epic battle with the Destroyer mech when that eventually happens near the end. And thankfully, we do return to Asgard in the final minutes to have a pretty epic fight sequence between Thor and Loki, which I like. And overall, I just like the performances. They did a really good job casting Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth, being some, at the time, pretty unknown actors who are just thrown into the roles, and they absolutely outshined and did an amazing job with them. But at the end of the day, like I've mentioned, it always frustrates me that this movie introduces us to the cosmic side of the MCU for the first time, the cosmic mythical side, just to strand us in New Mexico for most of the runtime. And that just always has frustrated me. It just feels like the kind of thing that I would do in a sequel to Thor. Have the first movie be set on Asgard, and then have the second movie be in New Mexico. But that's always just been a personal take. But overall, Thor is definitely fine. For how much I just dogged on not liking that they do the tonal shift, I do like the fish out of water aspects enough to enjoy it. I like the performances, the action's good, and overall, it's a very enjoyable movie. I've always have had that issue with it, and it kind of prevents me from putting it any higher than I have it right now. I hate to kind of throw everything we've already talked about it even lower, but we're now about to talk about the films that I actually like, which is only two of them in Phase 1. Sorry to say that. And we're starting that discussion off with, of course, The Avengers. This movie is so good, proving that cinematic universes could work if they were done properly. And this film does it properly, taking all these pieces that they built up over Phase 1 and bringing them together for a crossover that makes sense. nobody is butchered here, as everybody feels the exact same way they did in their original movies, which really helps you feel like you're actually watching all these different genres clash, because you have the wartime Captain America, the fish out of water slash god Thor, the quippy Tony Stark. The only one that's slightly different here is Bruce Banner, because of course of the recast, but I do like the more quirky aspects of Bruce Banner more than the serious one, but so I'm willing to look past that. We have a returning villain in the form of Loki, and he's so good in this movie, really carrying over his ideologies from Thor and expanding on them in this movie. We bring back the Tesseract from Captain America. Stark Industries is a major player. And it really just feels like they thought out every aspect of this crossover like a good crossover should, to deliver us a movie that's so good. There are so many aspects in this movie I love about the action, as there's a lot of infighting amongst the team, as you really get to see their different ideas clash, as we have the, of course, original fight between Tony, Steve, and Thor, who is a really great dynamic, seeing our big Marvel Trinity fighting like each other for the first time and seeing that. We have the big helicarrier sequence where we get Thor versus Hulk, and it's a really good sequence. And then, of course, we have the amazing Battle of New York, which takes up around 40 minutes in the back half, which really allows you to soak in that battle and really gets you to really feel the alien terror. And overall, it makes for a very good sequence, and I absolutely love it. Unfortunately, I just think the Avengers has some of that pacing issues where it does take a while to get back there, as I definitely think a problem this movie kind of fell into is they made it with the understanding that people might not have seen the rest of the MCU movies at this point. So this movie definitely spends the first while introducing us to all the characters again and kind of showcasing who each of them are, when it's really clear that they could have just made this as the crossover and you should have watched everything else beforehand, which is why I might like some of the other Avengers movies a little better, because they just expect you to come in already knowing who the Avengers are. But that's really one of my only main critiques, is that they spend a while doing that when I really just want to see the cool action. But other than that, I really love the Avengers. It was the first proof of concept that cinematic crossover universes could work, and this is the movie that basically made every other studio realize they should try to make a cinematic universe. So in a way, we also have this movie to blame for Justice League and the Dark Universe and all that other stuff existing. So anyway, Avengers is a great movie, and it's easily one of the best in Phase 1. But I mean, come on. Iron Man is my favorite movie in Phase 1, and I think it's the best in Phase 1 as well. This is just a movie that I think manages to excel, because this movie, there was no MCU. There was no connected universe. It was just Jon Favreau, Robert Downey Jr., and Kevin Feige just making an Iron Man movie because they wanted to. And this was before the MCU was even a proof of concept. It was basically just, they made an Iron Man origin story, and it works so well because it doesn't have to contend to all the lore. It doesn't have to contend to all the characters. It just is a good setup origin story movie, and it works so well as you see Tony Stark go from this arrogant jerk to growing into the man that eventually becomes Iron Man. It's so good. And I love everything that they were able to pull off in this one. The Iron Man suit has never looked better because it mostly was practical in this movie. I love, of course, all the side characters. While I'm not huge on Terrence Howard as Rhodey, I do like it in this movie. Of course, similar to the Bruce Banner problem, I've gotten more movies with Don Cheadle, so I like Don Cheadle's version a little more. But other than that, we've got Pepper Potts, who's great. We've got so many good side characters, and even the villain is pretty decent. There's just something really interesting about having this mentor figure that the character hero looks up to go through this movie being the mentor until eventually it's revealed that he is the criminal behind the mirror, which is so great. And he gets to have some great moments like the box of scraps and, of course, the final battle as Ironmonger. And it's really good even seeing Tony work through his different mistakes as he's able to defeat Ironmonger by using his intellect of his own suits, which is great. And of course, you have that ending, I am Iron Man. such a good moment that's come to define most of the MCU. And overall, Iron Man is by far my favorite movie in Phase 1, and it is, in my opinion, the best, as it literally doesn't even feel like an MCU movie because it really wasn't. It was the movie that started the MCU, so that's the greatness of Iron Man, and it's my favorite movie in Phase 1. So there you guys have it, my ranking of all 6 Phase 1 MCU movies. So that is the end of this ranking video, and I want to know if you have seen all of Phase 1, why don't you go ahead and leave your ranking of the 6 movies down in the comments, and if that's a little difficult, maybe just tell me what your 2 favorites are and maybe what your least favorite is, just to make it interesting. So, join me eventually down the road as we continue my road to Doomsday through Phase 2 Phase 2 ranking coming out at some point. But other than that, thank you guys all very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys!